You're listening to the Holistic Health Front podcast.
Whether you've already taken steps towards a healthier life,
or you're just starting to explore this path,
this podcast aims to help all of us live longer and more energized lives,
so we can all do the things we want and be the person we know we can be.
We bring on functional health experts, parents, professionals, and everyday people who want to make positive changes in their lives.
And we create powerful conversations about how to feel good in a fun, easy, and understandable way,
so you can live the most fulfilling life possible.
Enjoy today's discussion and let us hear your thoughts in our Powerful People Facebook group.
The information presented in this podcast is not meant to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate any disease.
If you have any questions about your health or the health of a loved one, please consult your healthcare practitioner.
Now let's begin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Holistic Health Front podcast. My name's Tyler, and I brought a cold with me onto this episode, so you might hear me a little more nasally than usual. But the good news is that we have Stephanie and Courtney here, whose voices are sounding much better than mine. Stephanie, can we hear your voice?
Hi, everybody. It's Stephanie. So glad you joined us.
Yes, and Courtney, can we hear your voice?
Yeah, hello, everyone. So glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. We're glad you're listening.
Nice. So anybody listening, you can now identify our noises, our noises, our voices.
That was a slip, man. Can you identify our noises? Oh man, we're good. This is starting off really well.
I love
Gotta
it.
love it. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
I'm the nasally one that says the wrong words, and then the other two are the Stephanie and Courtney are the ones with the nice sounding voices who are saying the correct words. So.
Oh, that's funny.
Today's episode, yeah, right. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about community and family and friends and really just socializing in general, because I think it often gets overlooked when we talk about health and wellness. You know, we always want to go towards nutrition and exercise and sleep and hydration, and for good reason, right? Those things are all very important, and equally important is your social life, your relationships,
Absolutely.
The people you have around you. And in such holistic ways that they support you. And I think we're going to kind of talk through all those different ways in this episode. But what inspired me for this episode specifically, and everybody has their own, version of this or story to go along with this, but I just got back from spending a couple weekends celebrating weddings, right? So I celebrated one of my best friends in this world. He got married a few weekends ago. And then the week after that, my cousin got married. And so I was able to go visit with friends in Mexico, and I was able to go back home to Ohio and visit with family and friends as well. And just being surrounded by that love and these people who just have your back and you know it, right? Mm-hmm. It's so special. And it really, even though I have a cold, my spirits are high, right? The cold has more to do with flying on airplanes and going 100% for a few weeks. And also I can say that my grandma makes the best apple pie in the world. I would put it up against anybody.
Oh, and those are fighting words. We there's some competition here.
We need an apple pie competition. Yeah. But I need a little bit of a break, right? So I'm not ready for any apple pie competition anytime soon, because we call this in my family, we call this stupid food. It's food that's so good that you become stupid and you eat way too much of it.
Yep. Best kind.
So, I made the intentional decision to say, hey, you know what? This is I'm here with my family. I haven't had my grandma's apple pie in years, and she made too much of it. And so I choose to eat this pie. I do not feel bad about this at all. Yep. I am excited about eating this pie. And also I know when I make that decision, sure, there's going to be some consequences that come with it, right? I was feeling pretty uncomfortable one night because I ate too much and my belly was like, oh, give me relief.
We've all been there.
Right. Yeah, and then it's no surprise to me that I kind of ate pretty, like what I call eat like crap kind of for a solid week and a half. and then traveled on a plane and all of these things.
Yeah.
And then I get a cold. Like, oh, go
Yeah.
figure.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay, right? I made that decision because for me, it was worth it, right? And I know and it's also because I knew I'm coming back from this trip and I know what my habits are. I'm getting back in my habits. I'm excited to be in my habits and eating the foods that I usually do. So for this moment in time, I'm going to celebrate and enjoy it, not beat myself up over it. My body is giving me some pretty strong reminders that, hey, you can't do this all the time.
Yeah.
But, and I'm listening. So that's the good news.
Yeah.
But my spirits are high from just being surrounded by all of that love and celebrating with people who I really, care about so much.
That's beautiful.
And I guess probably, yeah. Right. And I guess everybody here can relate to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess you probably have your own versions of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're put on this planet with, not millions, but billions of other people. We're supposed to be together, here for support, for love, for entertainment, for all sorts of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you said entertainment because I think often that's overlooked as well, right?
Yeah.
People think community, accountability and mentors, and it's going to make me better and opportunity to whatever. But what happened? What about just fun and enjoying yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I just recently had the opportunity to get together with some friends from high school as well. I went home for our, my hometown's homecoming, and I happened to have, cousins, actually second cousins. They're more like nieces to me that actually ended up being on the homecoming court and ended up being homecoming queen. So I got to go to the football game and, we got to see all of the people that I graduated with from high school. And, it's been 30 some odd, I'm telling about my age here. It's been over 35 years, but oh my gosh, there's something about those people that witnessed your history. You know what I mean? And they know who you are to your core. We were actually laughing about who got the better kindergarten teacher, and then we were laughing about all that type of stuff. But entertainment, we just got down and laughed. I mean, just laughed and laughed and laughed about some of the stupid shit that we got ourselves into back in high school, and some of the problems we caused or didn't cause, and it's there's just something about people that know you and can connect with you and having that community. Even though it's rare, we don't often get together, but when we do, there's something really rich about that. That shared history. That you have that with family. If you're fortunate enough, you have that with friends. If you are fortunate enough, I know a lot of people traveled all over the place and can't even relate. I had a client one time whose father was in the Army. And so she literally went from country to country to country. And so the idea of having a shared history with not just one person, but I'm from a real small town. So whoever you had in kindergarten, you also had in first grade and second grade and third grade and fourth grade, all the way up through high school. And I didn't realize at the time, because I thought growing up in a small town was boring and I don't know, just so blah, right? I was fascinated with the city and all those city folks. But, now here I am at my age thinking, wow, growing up in a small town where you do have those connections that you carried with you through the years is actually a pretty special bond. So, if you were lucky enough to have that, I hope you can relate.
Mm-hmm. Those stories are amazing, by the way, too. Going home and seeing people you haven't seen in a long time and be like, you remember when? Those stories are so much fun to sit around a table and share and laugh at.
And they get bigger and bigger, the stories do. And what happens, at least for me, somebody will speak up that hasn't spoken up in a long time, and they'll say, well, I know a part of that story you don't know. And we're like, oh, what do you mean? And they'll say, well, such and such was actually dating such and such when you did such and such. And we're like, oh, no, you know what I mean? Because it was a secret back then. And, all these years later, we're like, no way, and they grow, right? The stories just continue to grow. And it's super fun. We are in a group I'm blessed to be in a group of people that love each other. And, there's no judgment, but we have a good time rehashing those stories.
Yeah, those stories are just as juicy all these years later.
Even more so. Because we're, the older we get, the more we're like, I'm not hiding from anybody anymore. Like, yes, we kiss and tell now that we're older. Back then we didn't kiss and tell. Now we're like, do you know what? So it actually gets kind of fun.
And Courtney, you just had your family just came down to visit you recently too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was in August. At the end of August. It was really nice because I got to see my folks. They came out here all the way from California. And then I call her my sister, although we are not related by blood, but she is my sister. She lived with my family for 1 year as an exchange student when I was in high school. So she and her husband and their daughter came as well. So we had a mini family reunion and just really got to enjoy the island. And we rented a boat and did some snorkeling offshore and just had a nice time. It was so nice to see my parents, of course, and also to see Martina because we hadn't seen each other in a very, very several years. And it was just nice to be with her and just kind of slip right back into life. You have some of those people in your life where you cannot see each other for years and it's like no time has passed when you're together. And she's one of those people, just so easy to be around and happy and joyful. And it was just so nice to have everybody to catch up. And we spent, we did our dinners together and beaching together. And it was just wonderful to have the group.
Yeah.
And it left me really rejuvenated, a little tired, but really rejuvenated,
Yeah.
And I love showing off this
absolutely.
island. It's such a special place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I like that you use the word rejuvenate. Yeah, the island is.
Go ahead.
The island's starting to wake
people are
up.
coming back. Yep, in terms of people who live here part time are starting to come back, and events are starting to be back on the schedule. Open mic on Thursdays is starting to come up. Bingo is going to be back. I love bingo. It's just a hoot and a holler. And the island's waking up and it's nice to see people. There's a neighborhood potluck that happens every month, but it was, off for a few months and restarted this last Sunday. And there's live music and everybody brings food and drink. And it's just so nice to catch up with people who you haven't seen in months and just discover and talk and enjoy. And
I'm glad you bring that up. I'm glad you bring that up because I think that some people listening to this, and myself included for a long time, really, they don't feel as close with their family or that they have those childhood friends with those shared memories, right? That shared history. And I think it's a really good point that you're bringing up about the community events that happen right around town, wherever you live, whether you live in a city or a small town. Everywhere, because we're so wired to be social creatures. Yeah. That it doesn't really matter where you live. You can find something, some sort of get together within the community. And I think it's so important to prioritize, schedule those things into your life to go out to those bingo nights or those potlucks or those community dinners or whatever it is. Right.
I couldn't agree more. And I say
that. And I say that also keeping in mind that, for a long time in my life, I kind of felt like, I don't really have my friends in my life anymore from my childhood or from my teenage years or whatever. And I don't really feel that close or connected to my family for this reason or that reason or whatever. Until I just kind of gave it a chance, right? I started just reaching back out to those old friends because I had it in my mind of if I was important to them, they would reach out to me. Right. How many people walk around with that thought in their mind and they're not reaching out to each other because they both have that thought in their mind. And eventually I just put my ego to the side and I said, you know what? No, I miss these people. I'm going to sit here and lie to myself and say that I don't miss these friends. And I'm not going to reach out because whatever reason, I feel like they should have reached out or whatever. No, if I miss these people, I should be honest to myself and reach out. And as soon as I messaged that friend who I haven't talked to in years, it was just like you mentioned, like just like the old times, like, oh my God, I was thinking about you too. Yeah, let's get together. When can we do this? Let's make it happen. Let's prioritize this.
Yeah.
Or the family members who I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by oxygen and carbon dioxide. Breathe deep, breathe slow. Are you tired of nagging headaches, body pains, and feeling like you've been steamrolled by 2 p.m.? Ugh. Want to feel more alive with a clearer mind, voice, and skin?
Yep.
And not to mention getting rid of that pesky BO when the deodorant starts to wear off?
Ew.
Introducing to you today, water. Did you know that 75% of American adults are chronically dehydrated? And did you know that majority of people who are dehydrated think that they actually are hydrated? That means most people are not drinking enough water. But if they did, and they realized how much of a massive difference it makes in how they feel to be hydrated, they would realize that water can change their life. So drink more water. Aim for 96 fluid ounces per day minimum for adults. Side effects include peeing more often the first couple of weeks, but don't worry, it will slow down soon. I know I should really drink less caffeine. I just wish there was some way of getting energy in the morning without a coffee. Ah, the sun! Wait a minute. I feel good. Especially when I close my eyes and stare at the sun through my eyelids. Wow, this is great. I think I'm ready to crush this day now. Thanks, sun. The Sun. Use it for free with care. Hey y'all, hope you've enjoyed these goofy little commercials. The information is all accurate and valid, so please use the tips we shared. Even though we're having fun and being silly recording them, they're still 100% meant to support you and entertain you. We'll be getting back to the show in just a minute, but first, I want to really encourage you to join our free community on Facebook. It's called the Powerful People Community, and it's a place where you can interact with other listeners of the show, including me, our other coaches and co-hosts and everybody. And it's a place where you can ask questions publicly or anonymously. You can request episode topics, you can share your story, and celebrate with a group of really amazing people who will also be celebrating you. So we really hope to see you in the community. We think we're building something really special because we believe when you bring together a group of powerful people, there's just so many great things we can do in this world, more than we could do on our own. So we're building a special community and we hope to talk to you there soon. Now, let's get back to the show. I actually had a strained relationship with my uncle for several years. And I saw him this past trip back to Ohio. And we actually had an amazing talk. And I was just like, hey, whatever, you know what, we're here. I'm going to be completely honest with him. And I told him like, hey, I've kind of carried some resentment towards you for a few years now. And I'm really happy I came here because seeing you and being here with you reminded me how important you are to me and how that resentment doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter at all. What matters is that we're good and we can talk to each other. And we actually had a really cool, deep conversation. And now I just feel like my uncle's back in my life again.
Aw,
That's
that's
beautiful.
It can
nice.
happen like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that story.
Well, and I think Well, and I think we tell ourselves stories, and we tell ourselves stories about why somebody isn't calling, or why somebody hasn't connected, or why somebody hasn't reached out, or we just tell ourselves stories, and it's crazy what the mind and the ego can make up based on the stories that we tell, and so it like you said, just reach out, especially in today's technology. You can shoot somebody a text, you can shoot somebody a message, just say, hey, how's it going? We haven't connected in a while. Are you going to be home at Christmas? But it is amazing the stories that we can tell ourselves. And then once we get on those stories, oh my gosh, we
can find all the evidence in the world to support it.
Oh, tons of it. Oh, tons of evidence. I had an aunt. She's my favorite. I love her. She's my favorite aunt. And a lot of favorite aunts, but she's one of my favorites. And she is not related to my siblings biologically. She married, my biological uncle. And so after my biological uncle passed away, it was my mom's brother that passed away, but he was, related to his I think she had this story in her head that, well, the connection, which was, her husband, now that he's gone, then maybe she's not still part of, our family unit. And she kind of like stepped back for a little while, very short period of time. And we were like, what are you doing? You have always been a part of our lives, regardless of whether the biology is there or not. You've been our aunt and in our family for almost 40 years. And, but she was telling herself because her husband had passed away and the biology wasn't there anymore, then maybe she wasn't welcome anymore. And it was just, it's grief and it's confusion and it's sadness. And we just kind of tell ourselves these stories. And, one of my relatives sat down with her and said, "Oh my gosh, you are just as much part of this family as every one of us." We got to let go of the stories that we tell ourselves, for sure.
Isn't it amazing how just like a little bit of vulnerability can just break down all the walls?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I would have been, if I would have overthought it, I would have been way too scared to tell my uncle that I've been holding resentment against him.
Yeah.
Like if I would have just, the fact that it just kind of flowed out was perfect, because if I would have thought about it too much beforehand, I probably wouldn't have ever told him that.
Yeah.
But the moment you tell somebody that, like your biggest fear just kind of goes away. Then reality is just not that bad, really. And even if the story you're telling yourself in your head, even if that story is true, because I can already hear somebody saying like, "Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah, people make up stories but in my case, this is real. Like I know it's real because look, even if it's real, that relationship is so important that it's more important than that story, than whatever happened. Right. Yeah. I've seen people forgive each other for pretty, like, I don't know what the right word is, but like I've seen people forgive other people who have done like some pretty bad things, for lack of better words.
Right.
And they've been able to bring a very tight relationship back together again.
Right.
And so whatever's happened, I mean, there's very few things that are so unforgivable that you can never have a relationship with that person again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it just depends, because I have friends, family, clients where I've heard stories, about families that were not supportive and, were very toxic. And one of the best things that person could do was actually remove themselves, from that situation. But then we have to redirect and find another way to create community. And I think that's super important to know, that even if your family of origin is not the one that you have community with, you can create community somewhere else. And that's hard to do because we have to grieve the loss of that. I was listening to Martha Beck. Are you guys familiar with Martha Beck? She's she's incredible. She's a life coach. She's an author. She, was a regular column in the Oprah magazine, the whole 30 years or whatever the Oprah magazine was out there. She's a counselor therapist. She's amazing. And I had no idea. I've read 2 of her books and I listened to her speak, and I've read all of her articles, and I find her fascinating. But I heard her speak the other day on a podcast, and I found out that Martha Beck was ostracized from her family because of religious reasons. She chose to separate from some of the belief systems that were held strong, in the community that she grew up in. And because of that, she was actually ostracized. I mean, they literally, not just, but literally turned their back on her, and she had to go out and create a whole new life. And I had no idea. She just seems like the most, well-adjusted, she's just brilliant. She's a life coach. She's a therapist. She's a counselor. She's incredible. I find her just absolutely wonderful. But for her, to hear her talk about, one of the things she said that really got me was, it's not easy. You will grieve, the loss of those loved ones. But the freedom that you experience by being true to yourself and finding a community that matches who you are and, true to you and your North Star, she said, it's happiness that I can't even express. I found a freedom and a happiness because I was true to myself. And so it was really interesting to hear her story. Are we getting feedback?
I was a little bit from you, but I think we're.
My headphones died. That's why.
Oh, okay. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because a lot of people think I don't have that type of family. I don't have those connections with those people from, grade school or high school, but you really can find it somewhere else. And I love how Courtney and Tyler were talking about community events. One of the things that I tell people is find something that means something to you and then go volunteer or show up at those places, because there's something about volunteering, because people are there for a common purpose, that really allows you to connect very quickly to some of the people at those places. I'm currently volunteering to raise money for it's going to be a new, I don't know what to call it. It's going to be a new place where senior citizens can come, those seniors that can't take care of themselves, but they're not ready for any type of nursing home or anything like that, but they can't stay home alone during the day. And so we're going to create a day center for these type of people. And I was at a fundraiser. This was just 2 weeks ago. I was at a fundraiser and I started sharing my story about my mother who was terminally ill, and then my father who was paralyzed and blind. And we didn't have anything like this for him. It would have been so incredible for my dad to be able to go during the day and hang out with people and play games and connect and create community. And all of a sudden, everybody at the table opened up and shared with me their story about a parent or loved one who was isolated because of, some sort of physical or mental, issue, and that they would love to be a part of, something that had something for those. But I felt so bonded to these people. They were strangers. We were literally sitting at a fundraiser, and I was just immediately bonded to these people because they had a shared story about a loved one that was in isolation because there was nowhere for them to go during the day. And so I'm just encouraging people, find something to volunteer, because if you show up, there's a reason that other person there is showing up, and you might find a common belief, just something that you can relate to very quickly. Don't be afraid.
I second that. I volunteer as a turtle nest patrol monitor, and I monitor 2 beaches a week looking for turtle tracks and to see if there are nests. Unfortunately, the beaches that I've been monitoring don't have any, but many of the other beaches do. So it's been great. We have several turtle nests here, and the volunteers have been able to get together for nest excavations, which is after the nest is hatched. The director goes through and we count all the eggs and see what's viable and see how many turtles actually made it to the ocean. So
Cool.
We're getting some really good information. And we've also had social gatherings, potlucks, which has just been wonderful. So we get people kind of in a science and research environment, and then also in a social environment. And it's wonderful to see the community, because even though this island is so tiny, we're only 9 miles by 5 miles, and 70% of us is national park. So there's not a lot of living space. And when you get into these little niches, you meet completely different people, and you're like, wow, how long have you been on this island? 25 years, and I've never met you before. Excellent.
Yeah.
It's nice to branch out of your normal routine, and it feels good to volunteer too. It does. Nice.
It does. Have you guys watched the I think it's a Netflix series called Live to Be 100, The Blue Zones?
Oh
Have
yeah,
either of you
I
heard of?
watched that.
You did, and it's
Yeah.
basically a man that traveled to all the places in the world that have the highest number of centurions, people who have lived past 100. And not only do they have a very high number of, elderly population, but the elderly population, those that are over 100, they're healthy. They have all of their teeth, and they don't have any heart disease, and they don't have diabetes, and they don't have dementia, and they're living alone still, taking care of themselves and still cooking and gardening and all that type of stuff. And what he did is he traveled to, there's 5 places in the world that have this high concentration of centurions. And he wanted to study, why are these people living not just long lives, but healthy lives? And so he went and he interviewed all these people, and he was expecting it to be the diet. He was expecting it to be, there's got to be a certain root vegetable or food that they're eating, right? There's got to be a certain thing that they're drinking. There's got to be something in the water that's making these people live so long. And what it boiled down to, his findings were more about what Tyler was talking about, which is health is so much more about community and connection. And we're social creatures. We are meant to be together. And in these communities, that's what they did. They were very social creatures. They met often, if not daily, for fun. They all got together. I think it was the one in Greece, or was it? Maybe it was Italy, where they made their own wine. They've been making their own wine for centuries and centuries, and they all get together and just drink wine. Now, yeah, and they're all living and happy, and they don't have any disease, and they literally drink wine. They get together every single night and drink this homemade wine, and they laugh, and they play games, and they listen to music, and it's a part of health. Actually connecting to people makes you healthier, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I thought that was really interesting.
Moral of this episode: drink more wine. Just kidding.
I don't think they were like boosting it up or anything, but I think the intentionality behind that, yes, they're drinking wine and they're eating healthy food and they are communing with each other. Yes. They are joyful. It's the intent isn't to get together and drink wine. The intent is to be together. Yes. Wine is there. Good
Absolutely.
Food is there.
Yeah.
I think intentionality is key. I have, I believe he's a second cousin who is a pipe smoker, and that is part of his ritual. He smokes his pipe, he picks his tobacco. It's careful. It's a moment of enjoyment for him. It's not oh my God, I got to get this pipe packed so I can relax. No, it's the whole thing, and he's living a fine life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we worry too much about.
Do either of you remember? Do either of you remember where those blue zones are in the world? You mentioned that there are 5.
Okay, so there was one in Japan.
One in Southern California.
One in Southern California.
Japan was Okinawa. I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there was one. Italy. Yeah. Sardonia, or something like that. Italy.
Yeah. Sounds right. Here, we can look this up.
Oh yeah, there you go. If only there was this device. But it was fascinating because one of the things that I thought was interesting is the way that they lived. They all lived close to each other, like their cousins and aunts and uncles and brothers, and everybody lived close to each other. The other thing that they did was there was a lot of community type events that they did together. They might be farmers or shepherds or things like that. And in these communities, there were no such thing as nursing homes or anything like that, because when you aged, you just stayed with the family. If you lost a spouse or something like that, you stayed with the family. You didn't go somewhere else. And in today's United States, our aging population, they struggle with isolation and loneliness incredibly. What did you find, Courtney?
Okay, so we've got Okinawa Island, Sardinia, Costa Rica, Icaria, California, Loma Linda, Nicoya Peninsula, Greece, Japan, Ogliastra, I could be destroying that. And then Okinawa Prefecture is also in there. So there are
Okay.
quite a few. It
Right.
says, I think, so the 5, Sardinia, sorry, I should have condensed this. Sardinia, Italy, the islands of Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica,
Yep.
Ikaria, Greece, and Loma Linda, California. There we go.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And a common thread was, the social connections. Another common thread was volunteerism. I remember that being part of it. Another common thread was some belief in something bigger than yourself. And that didn't necessarily have to be a religion. It could be an idea. I think it was in Japan that they believed that they had a life purpose and that, your job was to discover your life purpose. But it was really cool. It just made you think really hard about, wow, we could take some lessons. And I know that Tyler just got back from Japan. We could take some lessons from how those people live together, commune together, connect,
And I think movement was a big thing too.
Yeah.
They weren't sitting around looking at their smartphones. They were outside gardening. They were walking to the neighbor's house. They were doing things. They were making their meals, moving and cooking, and movement is huge.
Yeah, they called it functional movement. They didn't think of it as exercise like we think about, okay, I have to set aside a certain time of day to go move. And no, they just move naturally, between the gardening, between walking to the grocery store and back, between, what they did shepherding, even the types of, I think it was in Japan that they didn't have chairs or seats around their dining room table. Everybody just sat on their, on their bottoms. And so you got up and down 100 times off of the floor in any given day, just being regular people, but it was movement, getting your body up and down and off the floor 30, 40, 50 times a day. That's exercise. I encourage you to get down and do it right now 3 times and not be winded, Yeah, seriously. So,
that's
it was
amazing.
cool.
What incredible facts, right? Like, and the fact that they made a documentary about this, I recommend everybody to go watch that documentary on Netflix. The Blue Zones, you said it's called?
Yeah. Live to be 100 Centurions. The Blue Zones, or Learn from the Blue Zones or something. It's very, very good. Very, very good.
And that's partially why our intentionality with this podcast is to use this as a what's the word, like a Trojan horse almost, to create a community, really, right? Like the podcast the podcast is cool because we all get to come on here and share our thoughts and opinions and share our experience and expertise, and hopefully people listen to this podcast and get something from it that's really valuable for them. But even more important than that, even if you listen to this podcast and you're like, oh, I know everything that they're saying, I'm not learning anything new, at the very least, I hope that this invites you into a community, right? I hope that you come into our Facebook group, the Powerful People community. I hope that you interact with us. And I hope that, eventually we're going to start hosting meetups, and whether it's virtual or in person.
Yeah.
And I would love to do like walks, right? Like meetups and going on hikes and walks and things like that. But there's so many different ways that we could do this going forward. And the thing is that everybody here on this podcast, everybody behind the scenes that's been a part of creating this podcast with us, who are not on the episode right now, and everybody listening to this podcast right now, all of us together get to create this together, right? So even if you don't have a close relationship with your family right now, or you don't have like a lot of close friends near you who you have that shared history with, or even if wherever you live doesn't have a whole lot of community events, I would challenge you that it does. You just got to dig a little bit.
Yeah.
But even if all those things are true, you still have this. And a virtual community can do a lot for you, especially a virtual community that grows close enough together that becomes a real in-life community too. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the vision here, is that it's not just a podcast. It's not just a place for us to talk and you to listen. This whole thing is an invitation into bringing people together. And I hope that we can create many, 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 many more Blue Zones in this world, beyond just the 5, based on the community that we create and the ideas that we share together.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. And I mean,
For sure.
community is beautiful. Because of COVID, my family and my parents and my brothers and their families started meeting every Sunday over Zoom just to chat and catch up. And we continue to do that. And it's
that's a
the
great
closest
idea.
we've ever. Yeah. And I mean, because I haven't lived in California in many years, decades maybe. So it's nice to be able to see everybody, at least once a week.
Yeah.
Not all of us can make it each time, and it's no big deal if we miss a little bit, but it's nice to have that
Right.
touchstone that's there. Just
I think so too.
Or nothing.
Absolutely. Well, and I think we'll get to the point of this podcast where we invite listeners to call in and ask questions, and we create, connection that way as well. And within, and just within, the comments that come afterwards, trying to create connections that way as well.
Yep.
There's just so many opportunities. I know it's super hard when you do feel isolated and you do feel alone. It is very, very difficult to make the first move. Almost impossible. There's kind of this frozen energy that occurs. I have dealt with, clients that are struggling that way. And if you know somebody, if you're sitting here tonight and say, I'm one of those blessed people that I do come home to a family every night, or friends, or a community, or a neighborhood, or maybe it's a work environment. A lot of us create community through work. But if you're sitting there and thinking, I feel blessed, but I know somebody that might not have this, reach out to them. Some of the smallest things, invite somebody to dinner, invite somebody to play bingo, go to bingo together, find some sort of common thing, that you can do. Maybe invite them to walk around the farmer's market. Hey, have you been to our farmer's market? But just pulling a person out, you'd be surprised. You might be the one person that makes a huge difference in somebody's lives, and you just didn't think about it. I'm going to read really quick what happens when somebody's alone and isolated. There was a study that was done. I've got this in front of me as I read on my phone. We tell my kids to stay off your phone when you're doing something important, and here I am on my phone. But I'm going to read. This was a report that was done from the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. It points out that more than 1/3 of adults age 45 and older feel lonely, and nearly 1/4 of adults age 65 and older are considered to be socially isolated. And there are enormous health risks involved in that. Although it's hard to measure the social isolation and loneliness precisely, there is a strong evidence that many adults age 50 and older are socially isolated. Recent studies found that social isolation significantly increases a person's risk of premature death from all causes, a risk that may rival those of smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. Social isolation was associated with about 50% increase in risk of dementia. Poor social relationships was associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. You guys, social and community is all about our health. I know Tyler started out talking about how we're going to get off of the topic of talking about health and wellness and diet and exercise, but I actually think this is in the heart of our health and well-being in a very huge way. So you can pull those up anywhere. It's on the CDC's website, but when we are not connected, our risk factor for health and comorbid morbidities goes up incredibly. So it's not just about how you're feeling mentally. It literally does affect your physical well-being as well.
100%. And one could even say that our diet, like our nutrition, our habits around exercise and hydration and sleep is directly impacted by our relationships and our community.
That's a good point.
If you're surrounded by people who eat like foods that aren't healthy for them, you're likely going to start adopting their habits as well. Mm-hmm. Right. So it is all completely connected. The moment I started hanging out with health coaches more often, all of a sudden my health started getting better.
Right.
And it wasn't because they're forcing me to eat healthier or anything like that. It's just because that's what we do.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're part of a community, you do what we all do, right? Like you kind of you adopt other people's habits and their mindsets and things like that. And being intentional about who you choose to have around you is incredibly important for that exact reason. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can go both ways, just like I said, right? If you're surrounded by people who smoke cigarettes all day, every day, and maybe in the beginning you're hardcore, no, I don't smoke cigarettes. No, that's so bad for you. You should stop, whatever. But a couple years later, and you're still hanging out with the same people, and they're smoking cigarettes all day, every day, and you're around them. Who, like, one night you might just be like, okay, I'm going to take a puff, whatever, and then it can snowball from there. So, and it's not to say don't hang out with people who don't smoke cigarettes. That's to say, get those people who smoke cigarettes to start hanging out with more people who don't.
Right.
Right.
Well, they call it
your community.
Yeah, they call it
it directly impacts the rest of those habits that you have.
Oh, absolutely. You do what the people that surround you do. My daughter has started reading with her best friend. They kind of set this whole New Year's thing, how many books they were going to read for the year. And every time I turn around, my daughter's got another book, and she's going through a book a day. I'm like, oh my God, how fast do you read? And all of a sudden I find myself like, she's handing it off to me, and now I'm reading it. And then I'm handing it off to somebody else, and she's reading it. And all of a sudden we're like all reading again because it's fun and it's community. And she's like, did you get to the part where such and such happened? And like you said, you just kind of pick up those habits of the people that are around you. So yeah, definitely reach out to people and surround yourself. And the other thing is you can be a positive influence on those people as well. Don't make the mistake that just because you have a little bit different lifestyle than somebody else might, that they don't want to hang out with you and learn from you. Positive energy is a very high vibration, and people love it. It rejuvenates the soul. And so if you bring that type of energy to the things that you're doing, it's infectious, and people are going to want to be around you, and they're going to want to create a community around that.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. And a lot of times people are just kind of waiting for a permission slip to start living more authentically to what they actually want to be. Right.
Yeah.
How many people, people who stay up all night and eat like crap or whatever it is, or smokes or whatever it is, or drinks a lot, whatever it is. It's a lot of times it's not that's what they actually want. It's more so that they've been kind of socially conditioned to be that way. Right. But then the moment that they hear somebody that's close to them have the courage to say, oh, I want to live like this now. I want to start living like this in a way that, like, I want to start getting better sleep at night, and I want to wake up feeling more energy, and I want to feel more hydrated. I've realized that my lips are always dry, and I don't want to feel that way anymore. So I'm going to drink more water. The moment that person hears that, and they're like, oh, okay. It's kind of like that breakthrough thing where, like, the first person who ran the world's fastest mile, like for years and years, or for like decades, the fastest mile ever run hadn't changed in a long time. And then finally somebody beat it. And then all of a sudden people kept beating it. It's kind of like that when it comes to your healthy habits. The first friend in the friend group to say, I'm going to start sleeping better at night and drinking more water to be more hydrated. And then all of a sudden the rest of them are like, oh, okay, yeah, us too,
Well, Courtney did it for us. We were on a podcast, and Courtney said, you know what, you guys, I value my sleep. It's a very important part of my self-care routine. And so I love you guys, but bye-bye. I'm going to get off this podcast. And I was like, go, Courtney, completely and entirely role model that you gave, do we have permission to do that? Do we have permission to step out and say, I'm going to take care of myself and go to bed? Yes, you do. And I was like, on top, girl, but we do, right? I mean, even if we give each other permission just by saying those things out loud. And so that's a really good point, Tyler. It's a really good point,
with that said, we're inching closer and closer to Courtney's bedtime.
We are.
It's-
We're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon.
And the moment that Courtney, thinking back on that moment too, the moment that Courtney was like, "Hey, it's my bedtime. I'm going to get off now and respect my boundaries and my commitment to myself."
Yeah.
The moment Courtney got off, the rest of us were like, "Well, I want to respect my boundaries too.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap this up now. I want to go to bed too."
Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, can you do that? Can you set boundaries on a podcast?
Heck yeah, you can. Heck yeah, you
absolutely.
can.
Hell yes, you can.
Good sleep is just, I don't know, it's the key to everything for me.
Oh, are you still there? You cut out for a minute.
Oh, yeah. We've been
Yeah.
having internet problems here on the island.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I said was good sleep is so important to me. So I do everything I can to ensure a full night's sleep. It doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try.
Yeah. It's super important. It's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So we're going to wrap up this episode then with that being said. I guess like one at a time here. Any last thoughts or words or anything that you want to leave people with in this conversation, specifically community, family, social life, etc.?
I want to say that community can be found in many different ways. It doesn't have to be, communing with your neighbors, communing with your family. It can be communing with people online on an online platform. I think we overlook that a lot.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter that you're not in the same room. Like I consider you my community, and I'm so grateful to have you in my life. I'm so grateful that we are on this journey of making this health podcast. I'm just imagining how many people we're going to touch and affect and change their lives, hopefully. And that just brings me great joy to be a part of this with you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you too. Yeah, same.
I think the one thing that I would add as we're closing is that do not feel like you're the only one that feels isolated or disconnected or lonely. Sometimes there's a shame around the idea of being lonely. Like why don't people surround me? Is it saying something about my personality? And that couldn't be farther from the truth. I promise you, we are all feeling the effects of COVID and the worldwide pandemic and the isolation and the pulling away. And everybody. There's not a single person on this planet that hasn't felt alone or felt what it's like to feel lonely. Maybe it was a short time, maybe it's a long time, but everybody can relate to that feeling. And everybody also can relate to the feeling of connection because we're social creatures. We're meant to be together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just to second that point, I met all of you through a coaching program, right? The Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And the whole reason, the reason why I chose that program in particular is because they mentioned, yes, you're going to have the opportunity to meet other people in class with you. And there's a community aspect of this. We're going to be getting on live calls and talking and sharing and all of those things. And at the time, yes, I wanted to be a health coach, and I wanted to, I didn't even know if I wanted to be a health coach. I just wanted to focus on health in any way that I could. And it seemed like a cool opportunity, but I was also feeling very lonely at the time. I had just I was going through a hard time in my relationship. I was feeling very disconnected from my family. I didn't feel like I had a lot of friends in my life that I could count on or who I could relate to. And I was just going through a hard time. And And also on top of that, I had just, I think I've shared on here, like that I had some financial setbacks as well. I had just received some of the biggest bills in my life and found out that some big investments that I had made years ago were stolen from me. So it was just kind of like this whirlwind of feeling alone and feeling like the world was just stacked up against me. We were just like still kind of in the post-COVID phase as well. So that adjustment and joining this program had a lot to do with just wanting to be able to connect with other people and feel some sort of connection. And through that loneliness that I felt and that awareness of knowing that I have to make a change. I have to do something different. I joined this program and it inspired me to take initiative and start an accountability group, which just got me that extra dose of community every week. And that's what started this whole thing. Like that's where we started doing this podcast, through that accountability group that we started through that program that I joined because I was lonely and I wanted to focus on health and I wanted to be a healthy person. And so sometimes the thing that is hurting you or that you're aware of is that you want to change in your life, sometimes that can be a superpower for you, or at the very least a catalyst to make a real change in your life. And I would challenge anybody who is feeling that way as well, to let that be a call to action to you, to take the reins and kind of take charge in creating the change that you want to see and feel. Even if you live in a small town where there's not a lot of community events, at least not very obviously that you can find, then I would challenge you to start hosting those community events and create that space for other people as well, because I guarantee you there's other people around you that are feeling that same way. And even if it's just 2 or 3 people, that can change your life. This accountability group was only 2 or 3 people in the beginning. And now there's a bunch of us and we feel closer. We've grown closer over the year and a half, almost 2 years. No, almost 3 years, right? I can't remember. I don't know time. But but I would challenge you to let that be a call to action for you to take the charge and you to lead that, to take a lead in that. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the stoic leader or anything like that. All it takes is just the courage to put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm hosting game night on Thursday and you're welcome to come if you want. Right.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely change your own life and you can change other people's lives. And there's something really, really, it's almost like, it's like volunteering actually, that there's something really empowering and uplifting about doing something good for others, selflessly. Right.
Yeah.
And even if it is selfishly, even if it is coming from a selfish place of, oh, I want to be surrounded by other people too, you're still doing good for others. And that's going to give you such a holistic, multidimensional, uplift.
Yeah.
I can't think
absolutely.
of the right word for it, but it's going to do so much for you in so many different ways.
Yeah. Thank you, Tyler.
Cool.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that we just recorded another episode of the Holistic Health Front podcast.
Woo woo.
Isn't it amazing how fast 54 minutes and 18 seconds can go?
Zoomed right along.
It did.
It's amazing. So everybody listening, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here with us today. And really, we would really we have big hopes for this podcast. We really want to reach more people and help them join a bigger conversation, right? A conversation about how to better ourselves so that we can better the world around us, so we can better the people around us, and just create this kind of contagious pull towards positivity. And so if you're listening to this, the best way that you can support is to, 1, download your favorite episodes of the podcast, leave us a review, and join the Powerful People community on Facebook, and just join the conversations. Be a part of the community. It doesn't mean you have to record a video and be in there like all face forward or whatever, but just look in there. And if you see somebody post something, respond and give love. Lead with love. Start by giving love, and then I guarantee it comes back tenfold.
Absolutely.
And by you supporting this podcast, I think that because of our intentions, our intentionality of this podcast is so selfless and pure. I think that it's as good as volunteering. By just supporting the podcast however it feels right to you. And so we really appreciate you listening, and we really hope that you get so much from this. And we also really challenge you to take this and let it be yours as well. Right. So, I think I said what I wanted to say. Any last words?
Nope. We just appreciate you guys
everyone.
joining us.
We just appreciate you guys joining us.
Let us know if there's something you want to talk about. Put it in the comments below, and we'll create a topic around that.
Perfect. All righty. We'll talk to you in the next episode.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.